Hello, this is Phil Tomzak, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 3rd issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And let's start with our front page. A story, Canada News, and it has a headline, The Little Things That Refugees Need When They're Fleeing War That Nobody Thinks About. And this comes from Nicholas Kyung, senior immigration reporter for the Star. Oksana Tashkinova has gotten used to fleeing to safety ever since Russia bombed and took over eastern Ukraine in 2014. She always holds on tightly to her son and her backpack. Inside the dark blue knapsack are identification documents and personal records that tie her to her past and present and shape her resettlement. These documents are important to continue your life somewhere, said Tashkinova, who fled Luhansk in 2014 to Mariupol, from where she escaped to Lviv in western Ukraine, and then Poland in 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale war on Ukraine. She and her family resettled in Edmonton 3 years ago under Ottawa's temporary humanitarian program for Ukrainians. I don't know what the future might bring to me. Perhaps I will have to move again. I cannot relax. I cannot unpack my backpack. I cannot just put all these documents on the bookshelves. I need to be ready for any changes life might bring to me. Given her own experience of forced migration, it's no surprise that Tashkinova felt a personal connection to a recent research study. In it, she and other scholars examine the challenges refugees face in securing simple things such as a birth certificate, education credentials, and medical records, and the dire consequences of losing them. Here's what the refugee study found. Led by Dalhousie University professor Michael Ungar, the study, published recently in the journal Refuge, interviewed 90 Afghan and Syrian families in Turkey and those from Ukraine and displaced in Halifax, Edmonton, and Warsaw, Poland. What we heard is the incredible challenges of how you transfer documents, said Ungar, founder and director of Dalhousie's Resilience Research Center. It's one of those hidden problems that nobody thinks about. You think about the trauma of being exposed to war or living in a refugee camp. I don't want to make light of those serious problems, but underneath it all is this kind of little thing that they will talk about. The participants in the survey all recognized the importance of safeguarding these records and did their utmost to protect them from being damaged, lost, or stolen during their treacherous journeys. We've heard stories of people who have had to carry in a plastic pouch around their neck their birth certificates up from South America, and they had to do it through the rain as they walked for miles just to escape whatever the situation, said Ungar. This was all analog. And I thought to myself, there's something terribly incongruous about this. The people surveyed said that they knew they would be in trouble without proper documentation because these papers not only define who they are, but also dictate their exits and entries from place to place and are required for access to support and services during resettlement. Tashkinova said displaced children need IDs and vaccination records to enroll in school. Youth and adults require transcripts to continuing education or find jobs, and they all must have some medical history for treatment. Sometimes there's no way for the families to retrieve those personal records again because the schools, hospitals, and government offices have been destroyed or no longer exist. Tashkinova said she still keeps all important documents in the very same backpack, which has since grown to include records from Ukraine, Poland, and now Canada. These are the documents that give the opportunity to normalize life in a country and to get access to the necessary services to have a normal life, said Tashkinova, who has a Ph.D. in sociology and taught at Priazovsky State Technical University. She is now a research project manager at Dalhousie. At the same time, personal documents could also expose a displaced person to threats and risks at checkpoints and in a country they're transiting through. Some study participants said they would sew documents into clothing, make multiple copies, or take images of them on their cell phones as backups to avoid trouble or destroy them when facing imminent danger. Tashkinova said she witnessed a female police officer discarding all her ID during the evacuation from Mariupol so she could pass as a civilian through Russia-occupied areas. They had to get rid of documents that could endanger their lives, Tashkinova noted. Some people had to delete information from their phones. What can policymakers learn from the study? Well, there are many takeaways from the experience of the participants in this study, and for policymakers in migrant-receiving countries, said Nilüfer Kuru, a professor at Siirt University in Turkey and co-author of the paper. She said people facing displacement should secure their original records and documents in a safe place and make duplicates and digital copies of them, which may still be accepted for identification purposes, and keep them separate. Passwords to unlock saved digital files should be shared with family members or someone they trust, she added. She said authorities must recognize the challenges displaced people face in obtaining and safeguarding personal documents, and also alternative ways to verify personal information. Schools, for example, could use a simple test to decide what grade a child belongs instead of requesting a formal report card and detailed curriculum. But I think the only solution is a secure, portable, and internationally recognized digital documentation system for displaced people, said Kuru. Families should not rely on paper documents that can be lost, destroyed, and confiscated during sudden flight. This type of system should allow refugees to safely store identity records or family relationship, educational documents like that. The storage and technological tools should be made accessible across countries and institutions. And next from our front page, in the news coming from federal politics, the headline is, "Not our job to ensure Border Patrol helicopter could fly in Canada," the RCMP says. And this comes from Mark Ramsey, the Ottawa Bureau. The RCMP says it wasn't its job to ensure its newest Border Patrol helicopter was allowed to fly in Canada, even as it defends paying for the Black Hawk it can't use after it was grounded because of concerns from Transport Canada. The Mounties also won't reveal the cost of the daily fees they are paying towards the $7.5 million contract for the idle chopper, as critics demand answers from Ottawa over how the RCMP chose a helicopter that's not eligible to fly in Canada over other options. The Carney government must provide a full accounting of how this contract was awarded, who approved it, what due diligence was undertaken, and what steps will be taken to protect public funds going forward, especially given the massive increases in military spending that are forecast over the coming years, NDP public safety critic Jenny Kwan said in a statement to the Star. The RCMP has continued to pay for the Black Hawk for 3 weeks now, amid questions following the Star's revelation that it was grounded on June 10th over concerns its use was violating Canadian aviation regulations. This week, the RCMP told the Star it was the responsibility of its private contractor to ensure the U.S. registered helicopter was eligible to operate in Canada, and that it's not the Canadian government's job to monitor aircraft registration or regulatory status. Asked why it was continuing to pay for the unflyable helicopter, the RCMP said the aircraft is voluntarily grounded until such time that Transport Canada renders a decision on regulatory compliance, and that the force reserves the right to ground any aircraft in its fleet. The RCMP described the grounding as the result of discussions with Transport Canada, but did not explain how it would be considered grounded voluntarily when a Transport Canada inspection had deemed it ineligible to operate. Transport Canada emphasized in a statement Thursday that the decision to ground the helicopter was made by the RCMP. However, it did not respond when asked if the Mounties could have continued to use the aircraft in violation of its regulations. Meanwhile, the RCMP must continue to meet its contractual obligation of meeting daily minimums even when the aircraft is not in operation, a spokesperson for the Mounties said. Details of that contract and the daily fees, which include costs for staff, are being kept secret as this information is considered commercial, confidential, and could negatively impact future competitive processes if they were to become publicly available, the Mounties added. Despite a Transport Canada order effectively barring further imports of Black Hawks and other ex-military helicopters, it allowed Ottawa-based Helicopter Transport Services, the RCMP supplier for 2 other chartered Black Hawks, to bring the U.S.-registered helicopter into Canada in May. That upgraded Black Hawk was only allowed to fly for marketing demonstrations, training, or special events. However, Helicopter Transport Services subsequently won an RCMP Border Patrol contract, replacing a previous company whose president later told the Star he was shocked and disappointed by the decision. Excuse me. Helicopter Transport Services did not respond to requests for comment from the Star. The Black Hawks have been a hot-button issue in Canada's domestic helicopter industry. At the center of disputes over them is the RCMP's use of Black Hawks since U.S. President Donald Trump demanded Canada step up its border security while threatening tariffs. Because they were originally designed for the American military's use before being sold to independent operators who refurbish them, the Black Hawks are not certified in Canada and cannot be used here without Transport Canada exemptions. After a push by some industry players, Transport Canada stopped issuing those exemptions, indicating it needs time to evaluate their commercial use. And now our next story, more from federal politics. The headline is, Danielle Smith unveils pipeline proposal with the support of Mark Carney. And this comes from Ryan Tumilty of the Ottawa Bureau. Ottawa. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled a new pipeline proposal Thursday evening that they say will bring 1 million barrels a day to the southern BC coast, with taxpayers bearing a significant part of the cost. The plan was unveiled hours after British Columbia Premier David Eby committed not to attempt to block it, as Carney showered BC with billions in federal cash and promised to maintain an oil tanker ban along BC's northwest coast. The pipeline project was described in a memorandum of understanding signed by Carney and Smith last fall as private sector constructed and financed. However, Ottawa will have a stake in the project through the Trans Mountain Corporation, with the project following the Crown Corporation's existing pipeline, as will Alberta. The private Pembina Pipeline Corporation will also be a partner, but no details were available Thursday about how much it was investing in the project. Smith said after so many pipeline projects have failed over regulatory issues, Pembina needed to see the governments were invested. We want to make sure that company knows that we're taking this path with them so that we can get it to the end, she said. Alberta's proposal pegs the cost of the pipeline at between $35.2 billion and $43.7 billion. Carney said his government's agenda to get Canada building major projects means the government has to be involved, but predicted the projects announced Thursday would lead to $200 billion in private sector investment in Canada. Our role as government is to be a catalyst. Part of being a catalyst is to bring greater certainty, reduce risks facing private capital, he said. The new pipeline, which Alberta is formally proposing for consideration by the federal government's Major Projects Office, would run along a route similar to that of the existing TMX pipeline system. According to Alberta's submission, it would use the same right-of-way as TMX in many places, but would end at the Robert Banks Terminal near Delta, BC, which offers deeper waters for larger ships instead of the Westridge Terminal in Burnaby. Smith and Carney also revealed the Oil Sands Alliance group of companies had come to an agreement on the Pathways carbon capture project, which is projected to sequester 16 million tons of carbon dioxide per year when complete. Smith said they also had worked on a new agreement to ease regulatory hurdles so oil sands companies can expand oil production more quickly to fill the new pipeline. She said the province wants to double production from 4 million barrels per day to nearly 8 over the next 15 years. This is transformational wealth and opportunity neither Canada nor Alberta can afford to leave unrealized. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And our next article is news from the GTA, and the headline, TTSB and TCDSB and other supervised school boards reveal millions in deficits despite big cuts. Critics say it proves underfunding. And this comes from Kristen Rishawi, senior writer, and Isabel Teotonio, education reporter for The Star. All 8 boards under provincial supervision, including Toronto Public and Catholic, are running deficits for this fall totaling $134 million despite deep spending cuts. In a surprise move Thursday afternoon, the boards publicly posted their budgets for the next school year, with the Toronto Catholic District School Board $39.5 million in the red, about the same as it was for the 2025-26 school year. The Toronto District School Board projects its 2026-27 budget deficit has been reduced to about $15 million from $74.5 million after the supervisor identified $59.5 million in savings. Provincial supervision is restoring accountability and putting school boards back on track to long-term financial sustainability following years of mismanagement, Education Minister Paul Calandra's press secretary said in a written release. Since supervisors were appointed, nearly $150 million in savings has been identified through responsible financial decisions that do not impact student learning in classrooms. But critics say all the budgets do is show the sector continues to be underfunded. Even Premier Doug Ford's supervised boards can't make do with the funding levels, said David Maston, president of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. This government has tried to present an argument that other groups, trustees and the like, are to blame for colossal failures in policy and budget decisions that this government has made since they came to power in 2018, he also said. However, he added, they have no one else to blame. Having the supervisors was 100% pointless, said New Democratic MPP and education critic Chandra Pasma. We knew from the beginning it wasn't going to make a difference unless he added funding. While the government has boosted core education funding for this fall to $30.6 billion, up from $30.3 billion in 2025-26, trustees and unions have argued it is not enough to meet actual costs, particularly in special education. In Peel, the public board is still grappling with a $10.9 million shortfall. This is ludicrous, said former Peel District School Board Chair David Green, referring to parts of the budget as a bunch of baloney. This budget does not benefit anyone except the ministry, he told The Star. But TDSB trustee Wydong Pei called its budget really good news for all students and parents. It shows that we can invest more in what matters most, classroom resources, mental health supports, and special education, while trimming unnecessary layers of bureaucracy. Calandra has said if the provincial supervisors identifying funding issues, he'll fix them. But given most of the 8 boards lost power about a year ago, the minister should already know there's a problem, and said interim Liberal leader John Fraser. The whole exercise in taking over all these boards was really just to distract from the fact that the government has not been sending our kids' schools enough money for them to have great schools, Fraser said. While Calandra can say he's targeting money for classrooms, the Ottawa Carleton Public Board, also under supervision, has cut a whole bunch of custodians and tradespeople, and that affects the spaces where kids learn, Pasma also said. The Toronto Public Board is making $34.8 million cuts to central staff, $11.1 million in operational efficiencies, $7.7 million from adhering to class size regulations, and $5.9 million through cost recovery for unfunded programs and facilities. On to our next story now from the world of provincial politics. And the headline is, "The Billy Bishop expansion plan prompts mixed responses from Liberal leadership candidates." And this comes from Robert Benzie, Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Star. The proposed expansion of Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport is emerging as a contentious point of departure in the Ontario Liberal leadership race. Premier Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives and the Toronto Port Authority, the federal agency that owns and operates the island airport, back the controversial plan to extend the runway to allow for commuter jets. While Mayor Olivia Chow opposes the scheme, as does provincial NDP leader Marit Stiles, the final decision rests with Prime Minister Mark Carney's federal Liberals, who represent 23 of Toronto's 24 ridings. Carney hasn't formed an opinion on whether Billy Bishop should be enlarged, and his government is doing a public consultation on the proposal that began June 8th and concludes July 24th. In the first indication of tensions in the November 21st provincial Liberal leadership contest, there are differences of opinion about the airport among the 5 candidates running. Navdeep Bains, a former federal Liberal cabinet minister and presumed frontrunner for the Grit Crown, is awaiting the results of Ottawa's consultation before determining next steps. It's unfortunate that it was left to the federal government to initiate a consultation process that should have been the Ford government's first step before any changes to the Toronto waterfront, including the airport, said Bains, 49, a minister from 2015 to 2021, who has been working as a senior executive at Rogers Communications and CIBC in recent years. I'll wait for those results before drawing conclusions on expansion. However, this is consistent with a pattern, a government that moves fast on things that serve its interests and slow on the work that actually serves the people of Ontario, he said. But rival leadership candidate MPP Lee Fairclough, Etobicoke and Lakeshore, said she's already made her decision. After consulting residents, businesses, and planning experts, I concluded that the PC government's fantasy project for the Toronto Islands and airport is a bad idea, with major risks and offering no clear benefits for Ontario, said Fairclough, 53, a former hospital CEO who was first elected last year. I voted against it in the legislature because I don't trust the Premier and this PC government, she said. That was a reference to the Tories ramming through the Building Billy Bishop Airport Act, which usurped the City of Toronto's role in the tripartite agreement governing the airfield and seized adjacent municipal land before the legislature rose June 2nd for the summer break. Fairclough said the Premier has not made a case for why downtown Toronto needs a massive expansion of Billy Bishop or provided evidence of economic benefits. The absence of a plan increases the risk that expansion will negatively affect residents of downtown Toronto and those along the proposed flight path. The uncertainty has already put a chill on housing development in the area that has been part of the revitalization plan for a thriving waterfront, she said, noting Ford's troubling history of bulldozing democratic rights and grabbing power for vanity projects. Fellow leadership candidate MPP Rob Serjanik from Ajax, who also voted against the Tory bill, said while any plan Premier Ford has to take over the Toronto Islands was done on the back of a napkin, that doesn't necessarily mean Billy Bishop improvements should be abandoned. If there is a compelling and reasonable case for any airport expansion, it should be based on mutual agreement between the City of Toronto, the province, and the federal government after appropriate consultation and local public input, said Serjanik, 37, who was chief of staff to former Deputy Toronto Mayor Anna Bailão before being elected last year. The province and city should have worked together to implement the option that would have provided the public with direct access to the Toronto Islands without having to rely on ferries, he said, referring to the need for a fixed link to the island park. In Ontario, Liberal Party, led by me, will prioritize looking at facts and data before making decisions that impact our province for generations. However, Dylan Morando, a former policy advisor to Premier Kathleen Wynne and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is also running to be provincial leader, said laying a runway across the waterfront is a bad idea. I'm not sure why Ontario Liberal candidate would not be immediately opposed, said Morando, 38, in an apparent shot at Baines and Sir Janik. This is just another distraction from Ford's failures on health care, education, housing, and affordability, the things Ontarians have actually asked for, he said. Eric Lombardi, he's 32, a financial technology engineer, said he's not prepared to support the Billy Bishop expansion the Premier is pushing because the province has not shown the public anything close to a credible plan. I'm not reflexively against the airport having a long-term future. Many major cities have business airports, like London, Paris, and New York, but we are making a 100-year infrastructure decision here. A more transparent process should be the table stakes, said Lombardi. Maybe Billy Bishop should be fully or partially expanded. Maybe it should largely stay as it is. Maybe over time the better option is to close it and expand public parkland on the islands. But those choices have major implications for Toronto's waterfront, Ontario Place, the Portlands, Pearson, regional transportation, airline competition, and the future of the islands themselves. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's move on now to news from the World Cup. In the headline, emotional World Cup fans rock Toronto Stadium as Portugal comes from behind to defeat Croatia. And this comes from Amarachi Amadike, staff reporter for the Star. Toronto's final moments as a FIFA World Cup host were filled with emotion for fans on both sides, as a match of twists and turns had a packed stadium rocking with cheers before Portugal clawed its way back from behind to advance past Croatia. Though the city hosted 6 fixtures over the past 3 weeks, none was more dramatic than Thursday's knockout match, which saw soccer legends Cristiano Ronaldo and Luka Modric face off in what was likely the final meeting of their international careers. "This is awesome. It's really cool," said Portugal fan Simão Martins, in between spontaneous breaks into song and leaps into the air. "I feel really sad for the Croatians, but they played a really good game." Diego Costa, who came in from Winnipeg for the match, was elated. "It shows here that the Portuguese in Canada are strong," he said, while fans jumped around him in celebration. "We're going to head over to St. Clair and party until they tell us to stop," added Costa, who said it's a night he'll remember for the rest of his life. While the 2-1 victory comes with a one-way ticket to Dallas Stadium for Portugal, extending Ronaldo's World Cup journey for at least one more match, Croatia's superstar, Modric, may have left the final footprints of his international career on the battle-worn grass of Toronto Stadium. Croatian fans, though saddened by the outcome, still proudly flew their red and white checkered flag. "I think they did a great job. We're always the underdog, but we always perform," said Croatia fan Mary Kustic, looking dejected as the crowd dispersed. Inside the stadium, noise levels peaked at the referee's final whistle, but the stands were electric through the duration of the fixture, fans erupting every time the star of the show, Ronaldo, touched the ball. Unlike during rain-soaked matches where fans questioned FIFA's decision to still implement water breaks, not many opposed allowing the players to rehydrate in the middle of the round of 32 clash as temperatures climbed to 35 centigrade. Over at FIFA Fan Fest, the city took extra measures to ensure the safety of spectators amid Thursday's extreme heat. After 2 drinking water trailers were unavailable at the start of the tournament, the city says it made sure the trailers, as well as enhanced heat relief measures, like misting stations and a cooling area, were available for Fan Fest attendees braving the scorching heat on Thursday. Still, the extreme heat forced the cancellation of the slated World Cup game broadcasts at Nathan Phillips Square on Thursday. We understand that this is disappointing for many, the city said in a social media post. Weather concerns did little to deter Croatia fans from gathering at the Toronto Events Center before marching to the stadium. Portugal fans were equally as unfazed, an estimated 10,000 of them pouring onto the streets in droves as they danced their way from Stanley Park southbound on Strachan Avenue. Some glistened with sweat, while others gained their sheen from a firefighter's hose after he climbed onto his fire truck to spray fans baking in the suffocating heat. Throughout the tournament, Strachan Avenue was a staple for soccer fanatics. "This is phenomenal. We're part of history," said Jenny Cambra during the Portugal Fan March. She flew in from Hawaii to watch Ronaldo, she told the Star. Over the past 3 weeks, Toronto burst into life with visitors from all backgrounds filling the streets in fan marches, while beaming locals greeted the crowds flowing through their neighborhoods, heading toward the stadium. Strachan Avenue wasn't the only place etched into the history books. Outside the Delta Hotel, where Portugal's team stayed the day before their round of 32 win, scenes were just as chaotic as throngs of fans sang "Siu" and marveled at the sight of their idol, Ronaldo. While Ronaldo Mania was a cinematic way to conclude Toronto's tenure as a World Cup host, Toronto Stadium showcased some of the world's top soccer talents over the 3 weeks that now seep into the venue's history. When Toronto FC players return to their home BMO Field turf in August, there will be a different aura at the stadium. Toronto has arrived as a soccer city. And the story was written with files from Liban Osman and Savannah Ridley. Now let's go to more sports news from the Raptors. And the headline, Raptors superstar Kawhi Leonard has a court dedicated to him in Scarborough. The players there are delighted by his return. And this is written by Gilbert Nagabo, sports reporter for the Star. At any given hour of the day in TAT Stadium in Scarborough, the sound of squeaking sneakers on fresh hardwood floor is unmistakable. A giant poster of Kawhi Leonard's iconic buzzer-beating 4-bounce shot that became the signature moment of that 2019 Raptors championship run overlooks the court. All the kids who were playing there Thursday know who Leonard is, but not a lot of them were present on that cold Saturday in January when he stopped by for a youth clinic and a ceremony to unveil a brand new basketball court dedicated to him. "Toronto is still in my heart," the soft-spoken superstar told an excited crowd the day after his Clippers were in town to play the Raptors. Little did anyone know it was perhaps an indication the door for his Toronto chapter was not completely closed. 6 months later, Leonard's return to the Raptors is music to the ears of the players on the court who look up to him, sharpening their skills on the court he helped build. "I think he's actually going to have a good season, be like a top player, and get the team deep into the playoffs," said Daniel Hanush, a grade 8 student and aspiring point guard. "If he stays healthy, everything will be smooth." Health is one of the biggest concerns in this trade for Samuel Parker. The grade 9 student who plays small forward was a big fan of Brandon Ingram, the biggest name in the package Toronto sent to Los Angeles to reacquire Leonard. "It's definitely an upgrade because I feel like Kawhi produces more on the court than Ingram and plays better defense," said Parker as he and his teammates took a break from a shooting session Thursday at the Kawhi court. "But he also gets injured and he's getting older, so I don't think the Raptors should keep him for that long." Whether he stays in Toronto for long, He reportedly wants to retire as a Raptor. Leonard has left a lasting imprint on the basketball game that the kids in Scarborough won't easily forget. They can read several of his trademark axioms painted on his court. Be great. Play hard, have fun. You are stronger than you think. Most importantly, they get to watch him have an impact while playing on their favorite team again and learn a thing or two from how he behaves. His ability to not be too hyped, stay humble on the court, not get into altercations with refs and stuff, just being cool and calm. That's something I picked up from him, said Milo Karambokas, a grade 10 guard who plays at the Cowie court almost every day. He's very focused on the game, and I feel like he's very disciplined and will do whatever you want him to do on the court. Longtime basketball trainer Hanif Marag never harbored any ill will for Leonard when he chose the Clippers over the Raptors in 2019. He was in attendance in January when Leonard came to open the court and played one-on-one basketball with Leonard's nephew. I think it's a great thing for him to come home, said Marag. It shows a lot from Cowie that he still chooses Toronto. It shows a lot for the city, how we treated him, and it shows that he's confident in us. Beyond what he does for the Raptors, Leonard's impact to the community through sponsoring basketball activities will add to his legacy. According to the CBC, the facility founder Jackie Fung said Leonard approached him about doing a Toronto youth clinic after the superstar worked with his team for an event in China. Fung said Leonard donated shoes, clothes, and basketballs for the event as well. This was the greatest thing that was ever invented in Scarborough, Marag said of the Cowie Court, one of 5 inside the spacious stadium near Birchmount Road and Lawrence Avenue East, and that has also added a small gym for weightlifting and other equipment. We see what's happening on the streets, with kids getting involved in violence. I love when I see this place fully packed with kids, because basketball is the gateway to being a better human being. Let's stick with more sports news from the Leafs. This is the Maple Leafs Notebook. Nick Paul's past, and Jack Roslovich's connection. And this comes from Kevin McGran, sports reporter. New Maple Leafs forward Nick Paul grew up in Mississauga, idolizing the likes of Ty Domi and Darcy Tucker. He had a Matt Sundin jersey and a Curtis Joseph one. I had a bunch, said Paul, acquired from the Tampa Bay Lightning on Wednesday for goalie Dennis Hildeby. The best part of my day was waking up, eating cereal, and watching highlights before school. To think that I'm going to be able to play for the Leafs is pretty surreal. It's fair to say Paul was a thorn in the side of the Leafs in his days with the Lightning and as an Ottawa Senator. He scored both goals in Tampa's Game 7 win over the Leafs in the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. I've always wanted big moments, said Paul. That's what fires me up when the pressure's on. That Game 7 was just one of those where it just happened. I was just feeling it that game. Now he'll use those big game powers for the Leafs. There's something about Toronto, said Paul. You grew up in the hockey mecca. You grow up a Leaf fan. It just means a little more when you come back to play against them. But to play with them, it's definitely given me a whole other excitement level. It'll be cool the first time I step on that ice for that first game. Paul was among 4 new Leafs who had introductory video conference calls with local media on Thursday. Roslovich and Matthews. Center Jack Roslovich said he's stoked to play with Leafs captain Austin Matthews again. They were teammates in the U.S. development program at 16 and 17 years of age. I'm really familiar with his game, really familiar with the person and who he is as a guy and as a leader, said the 29-year-old Roslovich. I've seen him grow in a lot of ways, so I'm really excited to be a teammate of his, work with him every day like we did a couple of years ago, and be able to have a seamless transition. Roslovich signed to a 2-year, $8 million U.S. deal in free agency, hit 20 goals the last 2 seasons with the Edmonton Oilers and Carolina Hurricanes. He's a right-handed shot, he's fast, and he can play center or wing. General Manager John Chayka called him a Swiss Army knife. You really want to find a spot in the lineup that fits you best. I think you won't really know until you get in and start, said Roslovich. Sissons on the Stanley Cup final. Forward Colton Sissons joins the Leaf on a 2-year, $8.5 million contract after reaching the Stanley Cup final with the Vegas Golden Knights. He also got that far with the Nashville Predators. It's the best going on those long runs, said Sissons. There's nothing better in hockey. Unfortunate endings to both of those, and that's extremely motivating for me going forward. It hurt bad, and I'm still reeling from it. That's the only thing I really care about, is to try to win one. No better place to do that than in Toronto. He's from British Columbia and grew up a Vancouver Canucks fan, but has played all his hockey in non-traditional markets. It's going to be a different experience for me and my fiancée, but we're really excited about the new opportunity, said Sissons. Just being a Canadian kid and watching Hockey Night in Canada, it's an honor to be part of the Maple Leafs and come see what Toronto has to offer. And finally in the Leafs notebook, Duhaime on fighting. Brandon Duhaime tied for 6th in the NHL in fighting majors last season with 7. It's a part of my game, said Duhaime, who spent the last 2 seasons with the Washington Capitals before signing with the Leafs for $7.8 million over 3 years. I wouldn't say I go looking for it. Anytime you play a hard-checking game, stuff like that finds you. It's super important to continue to play on the edge while being able to help a team win, and just being on the right side of that line. The 29-year-old forward is a bit of an outlier. He's a product of Florida's minor hockey system and credits retired NHLers with helping him develop. We have a pretty good hockey community down here, said Duhaime, who is from Coral Springs, Florida. A lot of retired NHL players retire down here, so I had the privilege of having really good coaches. My dad, minor leaguer Trevor Duhaime, was a coach, and then Jeff Creekron. He played a lot of years in the NHL and coached me until I was 13 or 14. Creekron played 262 NHL games, then coached son Jacob, who was born in Boca Raton, Florida, and now plays for the Capitals. One more sporting article from the Leafs. It's an opinion piece from Dave Feshuk, sports columnist, and the headline is Leafs Sergei Bobrovsky and Raptors Kawhi Leonard usher in the golden age of Toronto sports. Here's the debate. Which Toronto sports executive made the riskier dice throw on a 30-something future Hall of Famer this week? Was it Bobby Webster of the Raptors, who has agreed to toss a load of assets overboard to reacquire 2019 NBA championship hero Kawhi Leonard, now age 35 and historically health-challenged? Or was it John Chayka of the Maple Leafs, who on Wednesday spent $21 million U.S. on a 3-year deal for Sergei Bobrovsky, the former Florida Panthers goaltender, who'll be 38 in training camp? Leonard owns 2 NBA Finals MVPs, Bobrovsky 2 Vezina trophies. They're both 2-time champions. They're also both relatively old. Mind you, we're in an age of athletic longevity that's changing the definition of over the hill. On Thursday in Toronto, they'll play the first game in the history of soccer's World Cup to feature 2 outfield opponents in their 40s, Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo, 41, and Croatia's Luka Modric, 40. And at age 41, LeBron James remains one of the most coveted of NBA free agents. Which is not to say Chayka wouldn't have preferred a younger number 1 goaltender if one were available. Signing players into their 40s is not something I want to make a habit of doing as a general rule, but I'd say Sergei Bobrovsky isn't a general person, Chayka said. We're talking about someone who's been at the top of his craft for a very long time, someone that, as I understand it, is obsessive about taking care of his body and what he puts into his body, and about performing at the highest level. It's possible this is the starkest difference between Toronto's big-name new arrivals. Leonard, for all his checkered history of worrisome knee trouble, is coming off the best statistical season of his career, albeit in a contract year. If he can stay healthy, and it's the largest of ifs, considering he's missed 40% of available games since joining the Los Angeles Clippers in 2019, There is of-the-moment proof Leonard can still move the needle. Bobrovsky, on the other hand, is coming off the worst statistical year of his 16-season NHL run. Of the 29 goaltenders who played at least 40 games, Bobrovsky's .877 save percentage ranked 27th. That's sobering stuff. Then again, the Panthers were experiencing a down year all around. And after they missed the playoffs, it seemed a universal sentiment in the Florida dressing room that Bobrovsky, a free agent, would be welcomed back. Everyone wants him to stay, said Alexander Barkov, the Florida captain. Everyone except Panthers management, who balked at paying Bobrovsky. It says something that the Panthers felt comfortable pivoting to Jacob Markstrom. At 36, Markstrom isn't much younger than Bobrovsky. At a $6 million cap hit, he's only $1 million cheaper, albeit with only 2 seasons pending on his deal. With 0 Stanley Cups and 0 Vezinas, Markstrom is nowhere near the proven commodity. And yet the Panthers preferred him. Spooky or not, some fans of the Leafs will no doubt be happy to have Bobrovsky at their side. Twice in Toronto's 3 most recent playoff appearances, Bobrovsky was a big reason why the Leafs were eliminated. In a second-round series in 2023, he was largely unbeatable, putting up a .943 save percentage and allowing just 10 goals in a 5-game Florida breeze. In a second-round run-in in 2025, wherein the Leafs won 2 of the opening 3 games, Bobrovsky allowed a combined 4 goals in Game 4 through 7 as Florida advanced en route to a second straight Stanley Cup. If you can't beat him, in other words, sign him. Sergei's a real game changer for us in terms of his stability, the consistency, the durability, Chayka said. He's a game changer indeed, the most accomplished goaltender brought to Leafland since 37-year-old Eddie Belfour came aboard in 2002 and promptly inserted himself into the Vezina conversation. Durability, of course, has been a bugbear for Toronto goaltenders of recent vintage. In 2 seasons in Toronto, Anthony Stolarz has never started more than 33 games on account of injury and opportunity. Over the past 5 seasons, Bobrovsky has averaged 53 starts. That figures to make Bobrovsky-Stolarz a potentially formidable duo. That it reprises the Panthers' cup-winning tandem from 2023-24 doesn't hurt. Neither does the idea that after a Wednesday trade saw depth goalie Dennis Haldeby sent to Tampa in a deal for forward Nick Paul, Marlies starter Artur Aktinimayev will be around as a waiver-exempt fill-in and Bobrovsky mentee. Obviously, Bobrovsky's resume speaks for itself. He possibly ends up being the best in that position of all time, Chayka said. And to be able to secure a player like that for this team that's looking to break through, we feel like it was the right player at the right time. Not just on the ice, but certainly off the ice. The mentorship, the professionalism, the championship pedigree, we thought about all different angles. The full package just made a lot of sense. The Leafs and Raptors can hope the same for the new acquisitions known as Bob and the Claw, the right players at the right time, assuming the cooperation of Father Time. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's move on now to the world of entertainment. Here's a headline: Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce star in America's royal wedding. Everything to know about today's big event. And this comes from Sarah Lang as a special to the Star. Is Taylor Swift really about to marry Travis Kelce at Madison Square Garden? It started as a tabloid story, but all signs now seem to point to I do, in a 22,000-person venue in the middle of Manhattan. While nothing has been officially confirmed by the couple, the evidence is mounting that the rumors of a wedding happening around the July 4th weekend, later confirmed by sources like the AP and the New York Times, are indeed true. Here's what we know so far in the alleged lead-up to the celebrity wedding of the century so far. All the action is happening at Madison Square Garden. At this point, it's safe to assume that something major involving Taylor Swift is happening at Madison Square Garden right now. Is it a wedding? Maybe. Well, thanks to TMZ, who set up a live cam, and various other outlets camped outside the venue, the world has been able to watch all the harbingers of a big celebration loaded into the building. Chairs, a red carpet, catering that includes boxes of lobsters, a structure that some believed was part of a castle that was going to be constructed inside. Per People magazine, that's emphatically false. Alongside boxes labeled Garden Party, stage equipment like lights and a 40-inch mirror ball has been offloaded. The city has issued permits for a large event from July 2nd to 4th, and the police have closed down 11 roads in the area, setting up metal barricades to keep the gathering fans at a distance. The rehearsal dinner appears to have happened last night. The final confirmation that MSG really could be Taylor and Travis's wedding venue, a series of SUVs began arriving there on Thursday afternoon, right on schedule for the rumored rehearsal dinner. This matches the permits seen by the AP, which include a pre-party night for 100 people. Lena Dunham, Gigi Hadid, and Bradley Cooper were snapped arriving, while other likely guests, Swift's childhood friend Abigail Anderson Barrard, publicist Tree Payne, longtime collaborator Jack Antonoff, and Travis's aunt and uncle, were seen leaving the Ritz-Carlton dressed to the nines. Page 6 had a single blurry picture of the inside setup, showing apricot-colored roses and a plethora of greenery. That same peachy color palette was echoed by the soft pink color that lit the outside of MSG that night. The wedding itself may occur today. It's now widely reported that the wedding celebration itself will take place today, Friday. In keeping with Taylor's stated wish to have a big celebration, she joked to Graham Norton that she's inviting everyone I've ever talked to, because the idea of narrowing down a guest list is stressful. It's apparently going to be a big party for 1,000 people. The celebration will kick off with a cocktail hour at 4 p.m. Later in the evening, Stevie Nicks and Tim McGraw are set to perform. Per the New York Times, it's a black tie dress code and there is a strict no phones policy. What will Taylor Swift wear? The Hollywood Reporter has claimed that she's going to wear Christian Dior by Jonathan Anderson. Other contenders based on her previous red carpet choices could also include Vivienne Westwood, Oscar de la Renta, or Schiaparelli. Celebrity guests appear to be arriving in New York. While possibly coincidental, it does appear that there's an influx of Swift-adjacent celebrities into New York at the moment. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Selena Gomez, Sabrina Carpenter have all been seen in the city this week, while Ed Sheeran and producer Aaron Dessner are known to be recording in the nearby Hudson Valley. Someone who fans have noticed is conspicuously nowhere near New York this week is Blake Lively, Swift's formerly close friend who named her in her public legal battle with Justin Baldoni, sparking rumors of a rift. The couple has given millions to charity ahead of their wedding. Here's something we know for certain. In the last few days, Swift and Kelsey have donated $26 million USD to over 24 charities. In a press release, the couple said that they had given money to charities that include City Harvest New York City, Food Bank for New York City, New York Cares, Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, Harvesters, the Community Food Network, Kansas City, Missouri. The exact number of charities is 26, which Swifties will know is double her favorite number, 13. Are Taylor and Travis already married? This is a tabloid report, so proceed accordingly, but Page 6 claims multiple sources who say that Taylor and Travis are actually already married, having exchanged vows in front of a small group of people in private. Per their well-placed music insider, Nashville is abuzz with the story that they're already legally married, while another claims this took place at a small ceremony in Tennessee. We've reached out to Taylor and Travis's representatives for comment. And finally, Prince William is a guest on Travis's podcast. At one stage, fueled by a quip by Prince William himself, it looked like the Prince and Princess of Wales would actually be attending this wedding. Turns out that's not going to happen, but we've got the next best thing. Prince William is the surprise guest on Friday's episode of New Heights, the successful podcast Travis does with his brother Jason. And finally, let's go to Lisi. My husband may have dementia. He's a very proud man. How do I tell him? Well, this is for Ask Lisi. By Lisi Tesher. The question from a reader: do I live on a different planet from everyone else? Am I the only one feeling the economic crunch and pressures of increasing inflation coupled with stagnant incomes? My family has had to go without some luxuries this year, and when I say luxury, I mean ordering in Chinese food. We're fine, not struggling horribly, not going to lose our home, but we are feeling it. And yet, when I bumped into a friend at the grocery store the other day, she told me about her summer plans to travel to Croatia, while one of her kids is at sleepover camp for those 2 weeks, and the other's going up to her parents' cottage with a nanny. Another friend of mine, who also sends her kids to public school, works full-time, as does her partner, and lives in a modest home, just told me her whole family of 5 are traveling Greece, Crete, and Turkey for a month this summer. And a coworker of mine just told me how both her kids go to sleepover camp for a month, each at a very hefty price tag. What am I doing wrong? Signed, Can't Afford. And Lisi's answer: I don't know how you spend your money or don't, which means I can't tell you if you're doing something incorrectly or not. What I can tell you is you don't know what other people do with their money or how they come about it. Perhaps the first family you mentioned has inherited money since their parents own a cottage. Maybe the parents offered to take the grandchild but chose to hire a nanny to help them out. Maybe they gifted the Croatia trip and paid for camp knowing they couldn't watch both kids for those 2 weeks. As I say, you never know what happens in people's lives that they choose not to share. What I do know is you can meet with a financial advisor, make a fun plan for next summer, and save your pennies. Look to your left and you'll see the world's first trillionaire. He's probably hanging out with the millionaire celebrities. Now look to your right and you'll see someone sitting outside your local grocery begging for a buck. There will always be those who have more and those who have less. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 3rd issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Phil Tomczak. Thank you for listening.